Hi, I'm Murphy, and this is my channel, Murphy's Every Win, where I talk about books, because I love to talk about books. Frankly, right now, it consumes my time. I'm either writing about books, reading books, or talking about books. One of them, so I must love it. I have finished my fourth book of Shorty September, which I am enjoying a lot. I have been reading a lot of books at the same time in Shorty September, and if you see this graphic that I put here, this along the horizontal axis you have the days of September. There are 30 days in September. On the vertical axis is the percentage of each book that I'm reading. And on the right hand side, you'll see the list of books that I'm reading for Shorty September. The chart shows how I'm progressing on each of those books. So if a book has reached the top, I'm done. If you can't see a line for it on the graph, that means that I haven't started it yet. And so you can see kind of what's going on in this image about how I go about skipping back and forth from book to book. At one time, I said I was going to finish The Dubliners next, and I didn't because I picked up Women Without Men and decided to finish it, and then I picked up Another Woman, Another Time, and just absorbed it almost straight through. I actually was turned on to this book by Criminale about a year ago, I think, before I started BookTube. I started BookTube, I think, in March, but I had been watching other people's, and he talked about this, and this would be one of those trashy novels that Criminale continues to say, and I agree with, that it's worthwhile reading. This, I admit, this was a fun little book. It was written by Walter Kaylin, and Walter Kaylin actually produced a lot of men's fiction and wrote for men's magazines like Manhunt. I think over a 30-year time period, he produced a lot of short stories, but he only wrote 2 books, and this is one of them. This feels like a short story that might have been padded with things to make it into an entire book. But that didn't stop me from enjoying it. The reason I chose it for Shorty September is because I thought it was going to be a spicy read. And you would see that from the cover, it probably is. You know, it says, "Here was once a lovely, laughing flower of a woman. Here was now a bitter, beautiful, racked-up tramp." The story of how she became what she is on the cover is in the book, but the book is really a crime story. So let's talk about this. The woman you see on the front of the cover is Mildred. Mildred was married to Harry Quist, and when Mildred and Harry were married, they got pregnant and were going to have a child. They got divorced. Harry moved away for a while, but he came back. Mildred ended up marrying Emmett Gregg, and Emmett Gregg's a medical doctor. 3 years after Harry left Mildred, he had come back to LA and was playing at a local bar in the Harry Quist trio. So he had his own trio. He was a jazz pianist. They also had a singer. The singer's name was Jessie Blake. And Jessie, this was actually her first job as a singer, but Harry was really trying to help her get started. And she was a good enough singer, but she was pretty stiff on stage, just, you know, sang and didn't really connect with the audience at all. So Harry had come back to the LA area, and one night he gets a call from Mildred, and she says, "Come out here right away." And he says, "I'm in the middle of, a night of working." She goes, "When I tell you to come out, you come." So she says, I'm in, wherever she is, the canyon. And so he knows where that is because he was friends with Emmett Gregg, the man that Mildred married. So he goes out there. She has a, kind of a big house, and then they've got a guest house. And he says, "What am I doing here?" And she says, "Come with me." So she takes him out to the guest house, and there's a man, all bloody, beaten up, with an ice pick in his ear, laying sideways across the bed. He says, "What happened here?" And she says that Emmett went off on his annual 2-week vacation. She decided to invite this guy, whose name was Sidney Flake, appropriate name, Sidney Flake, over to, for whatnot. That's what the book used as the euphemism for messing around, having sex. Sidney came over. Emmett showed back up, caught Sidney and Mildred together, started beating Sidney up, and chased him out to the guest house. And, there was some more fighting, and then Emmett drove off. Mildred says that when she went out to the guest house, that's what she found. And she told Harry, her ex-husband, who she divorced 3 years prior, that he had to help her cover up the murder. That there was no way she was going to let Emmett take the rap for this murder. And Harry said, "What's this got to do with me? I've been gone for 3 years." And she said, "We helped you cover up the manslaughter that happened 3 years ago, so you've got to help us with this." She says, "If you don't help us hide this crime, then I'm going to tell about your manslaughter 3 years ago." And so Harry decides to help. But he doesn't have a whole lot of choice, because immediately the police show up. And this is, midnight or something, some late time, sometime when a band would still be playing at a bar. And the police show up. And the reason the police show up is that a bum had tried to stay the night in their guest house surreptitiously and found the body. And so he reported it to the police. And so that's the beginning of the book. And again, as I almost always say, okay, I rarely say, but I always mean, I don't like to tell what happens. I don't like to tell the plot. I like to hopefully set up a book that you want to go read it. The setting is 1961, and so it has a lot of pop culture references of the time, which, I was alive in 1963 and knew some of these things, either because I remembered them from the time, or I knew about them later. For instance, he was a jazz pianist, so Harry talked a lot about, Coltrane and Miles, which must have been Miles Davis, and the Count, which must have been Count Basie, and so on. So he talked about TV shows, movies, other things. It's almost like Kaylin was just trying to throw these things in as padding, like I said. Oh, and then one more thing about the padding. There's actually 2 short stories, some prayers and some chants embedded into, and a poem embedded into the story. And those stories, the short stories, were actually kind of interesting on their own, but the clearly padding to get this going. Okay, but why would I recommend this book? Another blogger that I read his review said that, it didn't have a lot of violence and fistfights and car chases and things like that you'd expect from men's literature written for men's magazines at the time. But I frankly thought the crime story was pretty good. It didn't take a straight path from here to there. The detective seemed like a detective from the 60s, but he was very Columbo-esque. like Columbo, although Columbo didn't, I don't think those shows came out until the 70s. And he had another quirk, and that's that he had a monkey. A very small monkey that he carried around with him all the time. Sometimes it was under his hat. Sometimes it was in his pocket. Yes, sometimes it was a pocket monkey. He badgered Harry about stuff. He was always showing up to talk to Harry, to talk about things the way Columbo would. And, I almost expected him to say, just one more thing. So there's him, there's a drunk bum, the one who found the dead body, who also plays a big part throughout. Jessie Blake had a history that was pretty weird. She had a protector, this big guy who lived in her boarding house, who wasn't a boyfriend, but if he was around when anything bad was happening to her, he would step in and take care of the problem. And in fact, that's how Harry got beat up once. Harry's car, actually, I would say Harry's car was a character of the book just as much as anything. And my mother, she only had one brand new car in her life, and it was purchased in 1962. It was a Buick. It was the car we went on family vacations in until she wrecked it. It's her car that I had the image of in the book. Harry drove a Chevy, but I pictured my mother's car, her new car from 1962, as the car Harry was in. That's pretty much a character of the book. Does this book have flaws? Yes. I would say, besides the flaws that I ever talked about, some of the behaviors of men towards women in the 1960s was not so great. The bar owner told Jessie Blake, the singer, that she had to put out, but he didn't mean that she had to have sex with the people in the bar, that she just needed to be more provocatively sexy in order to sell herself as a singer. There was some forcible kissing, which really disturbed me. I know how that can be. There are some other quirky characters I didn't talk about. There's a religious cult involved. Yes, there were a lot of things in the story. Was it fun? Yes. Kaylin only wrote one other novel. He wrote a lot of short stories for men's magazines. There's one or two anthology of Walter Kaylin's stories for men's magazines. If I happen to run across one, I might pick it up, but I'm not going to go out and look for it. So, Another Time, Another Woman, a book that I actually picked out for Garb August that I end up reading for Shorty September. That's it. That's all I got. I'll see you next time. Take care. A lot of it was written in published in 1960. Waiting for the phone to stop ringing. The only house in the world left with a landline. It was that pale aquamarine blue kind of thing, and it